So looking at the overall impact of research on the spinal cord injury community, there's been improved critical and acute care. So improved techniques in the initial management of the spinal cord injury, as well as the management moving forward, so in surgeries and what have you. A greater understanding of the injury itself and the complications. We've mentioned the improved rehabilitation techniques, as well as improved equipment, wheelchairs, cars, and adaptive equipment. We spoke before about the impact that technology has. So if somebody like myself, who has deficits in my hand function, the ability for researchers to have developed adaptive equipment and adaptive things like voice recognition on computers, something as simple as well. And we think about a problem, something as simple as well. And I'm sure many of people with spinal cord injuries have one of these. That's not so good. So a little button tool. So that's essentially a thought process of somebody seeing a problem, so having a button issue, and then how do we fix that? And we might not think that that's necessarily research, but a lot of that is trial and error. And research and development. The development of wheelchairs and equipment has been quite extensive in recent times, especially now that more funding has gone towards it, as well as driving assistance. So that's sort of some of the things, and more some of the social issues around equipment that, may not have been addressed with people with spinal cord injury in the past. So that's really been part of the impact. I'm often asked, and we often think about spinal cord injury research moving forward, but I'm often asked to try and put this into, I guess, a context of the overall impact. And the thing that always stands out to me personally and really resonates to me personally of the impact is how spinal cord injury research has increased the life expectancy post-injury. So an American neuroscience, and he passed away in 1936, but a lot of his work was with spinal cord injuries and other neuro disease. But his famous quote was that their conditions were such that 80% of people died in the first week, so people with spinal cord injuries, and those cases who survived were because the lesion was a partial one. And this makes me think of a story of towards the end of World War II, General George Patton was wounded in battle, and his surgeon told him that he had sustained a spinal cord injury. The reality for him at the time, and he would have had the best care being a high-level general, the reality for him at the time was that he told his surgeon that not to worry about care, and he died a week later. So that was his reality. So and for anyone who sustained a spinal cord injury, so the way that I look at it now is that a spinal cord injury isn't a death sentence for people anymore. So that's really someone like myself who sustained an injury, really an important area of where we've come. And research has also shown that from the time of this study that there's been a 40% decline in the mortality rates during the first 2 years after a spinal cord injury. And to me, that really resonates that, in that period of time, 4 out of 10 people aren't surviving, aren't dying of a spinal cord injury. So as we come towards the end of the session, I might start asking that if anyone's got any questions that they want to ask, just pop it into the chat function on the side, and we'll start addressing them soon. Some other areas of impact around SCI, and once again, looking backwards on the impact that it's had, is in areas such as the neurogenic bladder. So before modern management techniques were developed, kidney failure was the long-term outlook for many patients. Like, we think now that if you get an infection, that they can be treated with antibiotics. Many people have had, urodynamics, and we're able to catheterize people's spinal cord injuries, and that has been a result of research. So before all that technology and all that management skills were put in, that the outlook was kidney failure, as opposed to the ability that we have now for to manage that. I know myself, I deal with spasticity, and I take medications, but think about if we didn't have those medications and moving, obviously, and the ability to calm our spasms if we didn't have that. For example, I take baclofen, and the baclofen pill was initially developed for epilepsy, but they found that it didn't necessarily do what I wanted to do with epilepsy, but it did relieve spasticity throughout people's bodies. And also pain management. So previously untreatable neuropathic pain can be addressed with certain anticonvulsants and antidepressant medications. I do understand that these issues and these secondary complications still resonate within the spinal cord injury community, and there's a lot of research that needs to go in to further develop the techniques in these areas as well as other areas. But the point that I'm trying to make with this is that the impact that research has had so far has been we've been able to manage these secondary complications as well as other secondary complications. So who benefits from SCI research? And in the next webinar, really going to go into detail of how these stakeholders can really get involved. So obviously people with spinal cord injuries, family and friends, clinicians, so people who are working in hospitals, community-based therapists, community-based spinal organizations, and we've spoken about policymakers. So obviously people with spinal cord injuries are the beneficiaries of research and practices changing throughout time, as we've mentioned. Family and friends. So there's obviously been through better management of the people with spinal cord injuries that can take at times the burden away from family and friends. Clinicians, so they benefit through receiving best practice, updated best practice of techniques. Community-based therapists, as well as community-based organizations. So if you're working in a community-based organization, your practice is updated through, once again, research, as well as policymakers. And like I said, in Australia, there's been a lot of policies and change that have enhanced people with spinal cord injuries lives. So once again, I mentioned the National Disability Insurance Scheme, as well as simple things we spoke about, the social side, but research into what is good access, as well as as well as other policies that have benefited from research. I mentioned before that research is like a puzzle, and I've just taken some ideas here around the SCI puzzle and why spinal research can be so complicated. And I've put some areas of research. Areas of research that may interest you. And I guess, to make this into a puzzle is imagine that each one of these areas had 1,000 questions research questions behind that. And then behind that, another 1,000. And that's the type of work that goes into solving the SCI puzzle. And please feel free to think in your own mind other areas, not that I've listed here, but that really need to pay attention. And that's part of the complex areas of dealing with spinal cord injuries and moving forward. So I guess an overview of what we covered today is that research can convert the challenges into questions to create new knowledge. So thinking through that interactive activity that, that you can take your challenges and convert it into a question and then provide that knowledge and to create new knowledge. And in the second webinar, really want to focus on how us as the SCI community can take our challenges and then hopefully work together with researchers to create new knowledge. And the other thing is that research can impact many areas of the SCI community to hopefully improve quality of life. So in this webinar, I've really spoken about the historical context in which research has benefited people with spinal cord injuries in the SCI community. Throughout the next parts of the webinar, I really want to focus on the future of spinal research and how we can work together as consumers and a community moving forward to improve quality of life.